everyone. You are listening to SeeThroughPanel, comic book podcast discussing graphic novels, bande dessinée, basically anything sequential art. My name is Cole Harvey. I am here with Fahed Rahman.
Hello, everyone.
Today we're going to be talking about Algernon Blackwood's The Willows, adapted by Nathan Carson, drawn by Sam Ford, and published by Floating World Comics. Fahed, you want to tell them what it's about?
So the comic is an adaptation of a story by Algernon, and it follows the adventures of. Is adventure the right word? It follows the journey of two adventurers into this. I think you could describe it as like a swamp, like place, the strange things that happen to them. It's written by Nathan Carson and Sam Ward. Have you got the bios of the two creators in front of you, Carl? Yeah. Do you want to just read those out?
All right. So Nathan Carson, the writer, is a musician, writer, and Moth Story Slam champion from Portland, Oregon. He's widely known as the co-founder and drummer of the internationally touring doom metal band Witch Mountain, and host of the X-Ray FM radio show, The Heavy Metal Sewing Circle, owner of the boutique music booking agency Nanotear. Sam Ford, acclaimed illustrator and drummer of the Lightning in a Bottle musical duo Wizard Rifle. Sam was apprenticed as a youth to award-winning comic book legend Paul Chadwick. You might know him from Concrete. And he's used his skills he learned to produce countless highly detailed posters, album covers, and t-shirts for bands as varied as Mountain Goats, Agalock, Pentagram, Black Cobra, and Thrones. Basically, They both love metal, and they both came together to make this, I guess it's pretty metal, horror comic.
It kind of like makes a lot of sense. A lot of the motifs and imagery that appears in the comic is pretty heavy metal. Just to talk a little bit about, so this is one of your choices. How did you come across the comic? Did you see it online, or did you come across it in like a comic book shop?
So I love H.P. Lovecraft, and I saw some quote about him saying that this was the finest story ever written in the English language or something like that. Probably not a direct quote. And I looked it up, and because Amazon knows I like comics, this is the first thing they showed me. So it's literally just I was reading actual prose books, and this popped up, and I decided to give it a shot. That's it. Yeah, it was just luck.
Yeah, this is kind of it's a short story, so it's a short novel. I'm reading the digital version, and that's around 59, 60 pages, and you think like a comic or graphic novel that length would be quite easy to kind of like zip through. This took me about 3 or 4 days to read because the art is so rich and so detailed. So it kind of, we start off in Austria, and they're kind of like they're traveling through Europe, and it very much begins kind of like a classic kind of American Werewolf in London. These two travelers traveling through the countryside, not heeding the warnings of like the locals, and kind of all starts going downhill from there.
Yeah, even that first page, the art will like take you in because it's a map.
Yes.
And with the captions too, the captions are very poetic. I assume they're from, maybe not directly, but adapted from the original novella.
Yes.
But they're very, it's very like beautiful, elegant words, and then you have this art which is just so very intricate, but at the same time like muddy in places on purpose with the shadows.
Yes.
It will take you a long time to read this like barely 60-page book.
It's like the art is kind of very heavily so I was trying to think of like a clever metaphor to kind of like describe how I felt about the book, and it's kind of like it's like a really rich like chocolate cake. Like you could only have really like a small slice of it, otherwise it'd be kind of like it'd be too rich and too much to take in. So I was actually quite grateful that it's the length that it is, because it's not doesn't become like stifling or overpowering in terms of like you're able to kind of take the detail of the story in, the detail of the art in, and it kind of works at the length that it is.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think this is the perfect length for this, because yeah, like you said, the art and the story kind of work together to make it a slower pace, and then it's very rewarding at the end when you finally finish, because it's like a breath of relief.
Yes,
Because it was so tense and so horrifying for 60 pages, and it never let
yeah,
up.
it kind of slowly ramps up the tension. So I'm just looking at the art again. It's just there's so many beautiful, beautiful, weird looking panels in there. Kind of there's one that I'm kind of looking at the moment where they're kind of they're paddling their boat through the river. I think it's just before they land on the island where all the weird stuff happens, and kind of the top panel is this deer kind of like running through the water, and then kind of on the far end of the panel there's this eagle diving into the water and kind of like grabbing hold of the fish, and there's kind of, it's just so well done. And then kind of the second panel down on the page, it's these foxes kind of creeping through somewhere, and there's all these like slight hints that there's some supernatural happenings going on.
I love that Fox panel because the captions are talking about the Danube River, and how it splits into three other rivers, and it looks like a nerve synapse.
Yes,
right there on that panel.
Yeah,
and I love that because I didn't even realize, because I look at the art first and I read and then I look back at the art, and I didn't know what that was supposed to be, but I realized after it's the river, and it just kind of like that makes it take even longer because you're looking at things and then reading and then re-looking at them and being like, oh, there's new meaning to this. So it really slows down the pace in a good way.
And kind of the dialogue as well. I'm just looking at the next page, and they're quite clever into kind of how they kind of establish the relationship between the two. I've got to get a lot better at remembering people's names. So one of them's called Hala. What's the other one? What's the other one called?
The other one is called Opal.
Yes, yeah. So they do give.
But they only say it like once.
I think at the start of the comic they do give introduction. Yeah, so Hala the Swede and Opal. So I think Hala's Swedish, and then Opal is British. So yeah,
I believe so. Yeah, she's like a rich English.
Yeah, so I think they mentioned kind of aristocracy, and they're two kind of like cocky young independent women, kind of not really taking seriously what the locals are saying about the Danube River, and they're just the way they establish that kind of like what their personalities are, kind of their general attitude to the world is quite clever. And then obviously that gets tipped completely down on their head when they get trapped in this sandbank.
So basically the plot is that these two women are traveling together, just kind of exploring, not really doing anything in particular. And they are going down the Danube River, and people are telling them not to go. Locals in the town, just prior to their to this events of this comic, are telling them not to go down the Danube because, let me see if I can find it here. There are no people, no farms, no fishermen, and they're talking about how it's not for them. And they basically end up staying a couple nights on a small island that is basically revealed to just be like a sandbank that comes in when the tide is low. And it's filled with all these willow bushes. And that's where the story gets its name, because the willows kind of become a symbol or the centerpiece of the story.
It slowly ramps up the tension as they're kind of like they're staying on the island and or the sandbank, whatever it is, and kind of they start hearing things in the night, which is so beautifully well done, with kind of like the lettering and kind of strange apparitions kind of appearing both inside the willows and in the night air, and kind of makes kind of putting the question in your head: is this kind of all in their minds, or is it real? And kind of things slowly start going wrong from them. They run out of food and firewood and that sort of thing.
The plot I thought was very compelling. It pushed me through the whole story, and the characters I think are amazing. The ironic thing is, because of this, I've never actually read the original novella like I was looking for. But I do know that in the original novella by Algernon Blackwood, it is two men, and so for this they've gender swapped it.
Yes, I would be quite intrigued to read the original novella, because I mean it's like you mentioned previously, it's one of Lovecraft's favorite supernatural stories.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you're doing like adaptations, it can feel quite. I suppose neither of us know what the original's like, but sometimes you can tell there's like a stiffness to them sometimes, because you need to kind of chop and change things. But this felt so fluid, kind of all the choices that they made in terms of kind of the direction of the art, the dialogue, the character design. It just kind of like it brings you inside the world in which the story is taking place.
This reads like an original story. Like, I know it's clearly not, but it reads that it was made for this. This story was made for this format, which is very hard to do for an adaptation. There's no pages that feel like you're reading a book, probably because the art's just so engrossing. But there's no pages that make you feel like it's any less literary than a novella, which I think is a really fine line to walk on an adaptation like this.
Yeah, it is. The way, what did you think about kind of some of the, I think for lack of a better word, kind of camera angles that he chose to illustrate the story? Because I'm just looking at some of the panels now, and there's one scene, I can see if I can find it, where they're doing some cooking around the fire, and the angle which he chooses to do it at is just, it kind of brings the entire world into, I can't find it.
They cook around the fire on page 32, 36.
But yeah, it just, the use of like camera angles throughout the book is, it's on page 30, 38, where they're kind of, they're looking up at the sky, and there's, the pots on the fire, and they're just looking at the sky in kind of a complete terror. And that to me is so cinematic.
His use of perspective throughout this whole book is insane, because
that's the word I wanted to find. That's the word, perspective. Yes. Yeah.
It is definitely something that I noticed, because even back on that first panel we talked about with where they're in the boat and the deer is running through the water, that's a perspective where half of the camera, if you call it that, is underwater and half is above the water. So from the get-go, he's using some crazy perspectives. And then, this one right here you're talking about, it's like worm's eye view, looking up, like you're looking up at their noses almost. Yeah, he's great at that. And he does it with his figure work too. Like, a lot of artists can draw like a tent from many perspectives, but it's hard to draw people like that and make them look right. And he does it the whole time.
Yes, this is, it's kind of panels like that, and there's a few other panels. Maybe this, if you try to do this in film, it wouldn't work, and if you try to do it describing it, it wouldn't work. The story works exceptionally well as a comic. Oh yeah, so in terms of visual medium, obviously, kind of the in kind of like cinema or TV, you wouldn't be able to pull some of these shots off. You'd only be able to kind of pull them off in the comic book medium. So it's exceptionally well done. Some of the angle perspectives that he decides to use.
I definitely agree, and they need a huge special effects budget if they wanted to pull this off in any other, because like the cosmic horror, when you see it in physical form, it is absolutely terrifying. Just a mass of tendrils and Lovecraftian parts that, if this was a prose book, would take 8 paragraphs to describe, and stuff you couldn't put into words, and stuff that you couldn't make out of like you couldn't make this out of practical effects. I guarantee it, because the thing's a mile high.
Yes,
There's a
and kind
tower
of
that goes to the moon.
yeah. The other thing that makes the story work, exception. I'm really happy they made this decision was to keep the story in black and white. If it was in a movie, I think the temptation would be for it to be in color, and I think just the fact that it's in black and white, it's in inks, just makes it even like the mood even more creepy. I mean, there's this, I'm just looking at another panel where she's kind of running. It's on page 26, and she's just kind of running through this. I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of like this nightmarish vision. Is kind of faces like vomiting out trees, and yeah, it's just horrific.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely Lovecraft-esque in the fact that it's not describable, because they got that angle right. That's one of the hardest things. I've read a lot of Lovecraft adaptations, and that's always the hardest thing, right? Because he always says that the things that he's talking about are indescribable. But this is my favorite interpretation of that, because I could obviously describe them. It would take me about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But it's just, even when you look at it, you really don't know what you're looking at it, no matter how long you've been staring at the page for.
Yes, that's kind of that is kind of the I think you've hit the nail on the head. I'm just looking at kind of page 38, and I'm still not entirely sure kind of what it is. It looks maybe like two lungs, but it's not really that. It's kind of them trying to process what they're seeing. There's so many. I mean, I think we're kind of repeating the same thing kind of over and over again. Kind of like the art is really good. It really establishes kind of the mood of the story really well.
We probably should talk a bit about the story. It's hard to not talk about the art.
Yeah. So the story is, I want to say it's like a basic story, because it's not. I think it's definitely, the actual plot is quite basic, but in terms of what it does, I think the characters, I think really make the book kind of the. Who would you say the main protagonist is? Opal, I think, because most of the story is told through her point of view. Yeah,
Opal, and then Hala kind of serves as the guide towards the end, I would say.
What journey do you think kind of like Opal goes on through? What do you think she kind of starts the book off as, and kind of where do you think she finishes the book in the end?
When you open, one of the first things you get is that scene at the town where she's kind of just being a dick, and it's basically the first time she mentions that she doesn't like the common folk type deal. Like, she's kind of like she comes from richer blood, and she's kind of, in that way, she kind of is demeaning to other people. And then the other thing about Opal is that she doesn't believe in any nonsense. So any supernatural thing, I would say probably even any religious thing, she is just scoffing at and laughing at you. And so in this, she has a very difficult time believing what's going on. And that's kind of the whole thing, is that the more you don't believe in it, I guess, I think that's how it went. It was kind of abstract, but when they're trying to just not think about it, because if you think about it, it finds you. And she goes off on this rant that this has all just been like a psychotic episode and none of it's real, and they should just like take it easy. And that's when it finds them. So she's kind of fighting with herself to really believe that this is happening, and to understand that there may be, larger forces, which is kind of the whole thing about cosmic horror, is that there's these large, unknowable cosmic powers. And that's what she's coming to understand, and kind of has to like change her own mind, along with Hala changing her mind about that.
Yeah, so I think Hala kind of comes to realize the danger that they're in a lot sooner than Opal does. I think Opal really does struggle with the kind of the nature of the events that are happening. She's the one who's trying to come up with rational explanations of what's occurring on the island. And I think that what's the word I'm looking for? That rigidity in terms of not wanting to open her mind up to kind of other possibilities really pushes her to the edge when she actually does come to accept that, there is something very, very badly wrong on the island.
Yeah, I think Hala. If this was a Hala focused story, it wouldn't be as scary because she kind of towards the beginning of the third act, I would say, you realize that she's got some knowledge about this type of stuff. I don't know exactly where it comes from, but she kind of is the one that knows what to do, how to act. So if we were getting it from her perspective, there would be a lot less tension because she knows how to avoid these things, and she's the first one to see the signs.
Yeah.
But because you're getting it from Opal's perspective, everything is a little bit more mysterious, and you don't know if it could just be like a psychotic break, honestly.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. So they land on the island. My favorite bit is kind of one thing that horror does really well is that what they do really well in this book is kind of establish kind of a really creepy thing, and then they'll give a little bit of rational explanation. So early on in the book, they see this creepy thing in the water, and they think it's like the body of a dead man, and it turns out to be like an otter. So you're just thinking, oh, maybe they are just imagining things, but then things slowly start kind of ramping up. They start seeing things, different shapes and shadows in the willows, and then Opal is just kind of, she just goes on this weird ramble around the island, really, doesn't she?
Yeah. She kind of, just wanders around, and that's where everything goes wrong. I think that kind of falls into the stereotypical horror thing where everyone's a little bit dumb. But I rationalize that because, like, obviously, if I was on an island and it was just you and me, I would go anywhere you were not. I would just be hanging out with you. But these people are like experienced travelers. They've been traveling through many expeditions, it sounds like. So, and she's a very rational person. So I'm not going to say that was definitely in character for her to do something like that.
Yeah, I think. Well, the thing is, you say that there's I'm not too sure if it's on in the States, or there's a reality TV show called, I believe it's called The Island in the UK, where they dump a bunch of people on the island that don't know each other, and people do just wander off. They just wander off into this place that they don't know, and people get really badly hurt, and the others have to come and rescue them and stuff like that. It's just like, well, why don't you just flipping stay together? But yes, she decides to go kind of like walk about, and I'm not entirely sure kind of in the story whether her decision to go walk about is because I read this a couple of weeks ago and I haven't had time to reread it. I got a slight sense that kind of she was being drawn into the willows, kind of like subconsciously. She's like being pushed into there, and she's not realised she's being kind of enticed into kind of into this dangerous place.
Yeah, I agree, because the willows kind of have this. They do actually have like a call, like they have a sound that I think it's on the second day they're there. Everything is quiet, and they finally mention that they can, when everything's quiet, they can hear the sound of the willows. So I think that's probably right. Yeah, I think something was pulling her. That's usually how this cosmic horror stuff works. I can't find the exact page where she goes off on her own, decides to do that. Yeah, here, I have a nice thing. I like this page a lot because it kind of shows her mindset. It's when she's dozing off to sleep, right before she walks out of the tent alone, and the very bad stuff happens. It says, the last things I remembered were the shaking willows and heavy wind buffeting our taut little house. Then sleep came down and covered all with its soft and delicious forgetfulness. That's the kind of like
such a oof. Yeah, that's good writing, isn't it?
It's very like flowery, but also it can become very visceral at the same time. I love the writing in this. I don't know how much is directly pulled, but I imagine Nathan Carson did a pretty good share of the work here.
Yeah, this is. Yeah, I mean, like we've talked a lot about the art, but Nathan, I think it's done a lot of heavy lifting as well. Because do you know how long the novella is at all?
I do not. I remember it being pretty short when I looked at it. I'm not exactly sure though.
Okay, but adaptation anyway is it's quite a difficult thing to do. Kind of just speaking from my own personal experience, is very difficult to not decide what dialogue to keep. You need to shorten it down and all that sort of thing. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And Nathan's done a fantastic job here as well.
Overall, this is probably one of my favorite horror comics. I bought it maybe late 2019, and this is my fourth or fifth reread of it, just because it's so short. But if you really have like a good stretch of time, you can take your time and just look at every single fine line that Sam Ford puts down, because it is a work of art, I think.
Definitely. Definitely. What is, because I'm reading the digital version, kind of what's the hard copy like? Have you got like a soft cover, or is it a hardcover version?
It is just a trade paperback. I really wish there was like a nice hardcover for this.
Oh man, that's yeah. Because I can just imagine this as a nice hardcover sitting on a shelf. Yeah,
That would be beautiful. Yeah, it's just a paperback. It's Floating World Comics, so I don't know if they do. They're a pretty small publisher. I don't know if they, it's pretty expensive to put out a hardcover, especially something this short. But,
yeah,
if it gets the traction, that would be amazing. And I would love to see Sam Ford. I don't know what else he does, but Sam Ford, I want to see his art in more comics, please.
yeah. So I've kind of Floating World comics. Sam and Nathan have, because I tweeted that we were going to be covering this, so they've all asked us to kind of keep them abreast of when the episode comes out, and I think my recommendation is, we kind of talked about most of the things that happen in the book. Do you want to go into kind of heavy spoiler territories and talk about kind of the ending of the book, or should we kind of
I'm
leave
good
that
with that. I'm good with that.
Yeah, so it's to say both of them kind of like, now let's people discover what happens in the end. Because I want to encourage people to read the book, and if we give away the ending, they might not do so. Especially with horror, you kind of need that kind of tension. Is will they, won't they survive? So I would very heavily recommend this book if you can get hold of it. Like the digital version that I've got is perfectly fine. I've previously complained about other digital comics that I've kind of read, which were really, really difficult. This I don't think relies as much on double page spreads. You can kind of read it digitally fairly well. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Kind of, have we mentioned kind of the lettering as well? Kind of how he brings the kind of the different kind of atmospheric effects through kind of like lettering in the art, and then kind of one of the characters is kind of the bubbles changes as they kind of start. So that the bubbles initially, when they're at the start of the story, they're kind of quite oval shape, but then as they're starting to slowly lose their mind, it kind of becomes a little bit more squiggly lines. So like the lettering as well is also excellent. I really enjoyed it. I think it's is a good shout out by you to pick this one.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I see what you're saying about the lettering. Yeah, there's some really nice spots where sound effects will be, I don't know if it's hand lettered or just very well done.
Yeah.
But it looks nice there. Yeah, I agree. The whole thing, probably one of the best horror books you'll find right now, I think. I own a lot of them, and this is one of the finest ones. Couldn't recommend it more.
Horror comics aren't easy to do. They're really, 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 really difficult to do. And this one, at the turn of every page, it kind of keeps you on edge of what, are they going to survive? Is something more terrible going to happen to them? So yeah, it's definitely. I think when is Halloween coming up? It's we're in September.
We're in
now,
September, so a little bit over a month.
Yeah, so if you need a Halloween read, I think this one is definitely one to go with. We should probably, if we are recording around Halloween, probably choose a horror comic to review around that period.
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, we did this too early, but we have plenty more options. We have plenty more options.
So we've got kind of like a horror comic next week as well. So kind of a sci-fi horror comic. I keep on calling it Red Skies Over Berlin, but that's not what it's called. It is called
Strange Skies Over East Berlin.
Strange Skies Over East Berlin. That's what it's called. So I think that's the next one that we are.
I haven't read that yet. Is it a bit horror?
Oh man, if I give you so I've got a really good one-line description of it, but it's also a massive spoiler for the book.
Oh, don't say it then.
So it's kind of a sci-fi spy drama with kind of like horror inflections in there.
That's a lot. I'm excited.
Yeah. So I quite enjoyed that as well. Very nice. So yeah, guys, if you could please donate to our tip jar, so it just helps us cover the cost of running the podcast. We've got a few exciting announcements that we not in a position to make yet, so please keep your ears out for those as well. Anything else to say, Carl?
No, we got a lot of fun stuff coming. If you like the show, check out the tip jar. It's in the description. We have a lot of fun making the show, so that just kind of helps us keep it going, makes us feel like we have more time to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
I really appreciate you guys listening.
Yeah, and there've been kind of a lot of kind comments on social media about this show. So thank you guys for following us on social media and kind of the kind reviews. If you can leave reviews for us on the podcast that you're listening to this to, that I think generally kind of helps with that discoverability and things like that. So yeah. And I'm all over the YouTube. If you want to leave a comment, tell me a book I should review, tell me why I suck, disagree, I'll reply. I love that. Yeah. Please send us your recommendations for book to review, and if you're a creator, writer, illustrator, and if you're interested in coming on the podcast to talk about stuff, please get in touch as well.
All right, awesome, man.
Okay,
thank you guys for listening.
Thanks. Bye, guys.